Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Become an Amazing Fundraiser. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of what you see or something that looks like this in the upper right corner on your device. You may submit your questions into the questions pane of the control panel at any time during the presentation. These questions will be addressed at the end of today's presentation, and the recorded webinar will be available on our website, www.borderpartnership.org/bpp-events-html. You can see that on your screen. Before I introduce today's presenter, I would like to share a little bit about the BPP. The BPP, or the U.S.-Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership, is the only binational group along and across the 2,000-mile border that unites a vibrant network of national, regional, and local leaders and organizations who are making a difference on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border. Our mission is to support a network of organizations that build prosperity through leadership, collaboration, and philanthropy in the U.S.-Mexico border region. To learn more about BPP and membership benefits, please visit our website, www.borderpartnership.org. You will also notice that in the handout section of your control panel, you can download a membership kit. I would like to present George Nunes, who is presenter of Captacion Fundraising Consulting. George has generated close to $15 million in contributed and earned revenue during 35 years working in the public and private sectors. At Captacion Fundraising Consulting, Nunes collaborates with clients to create stable, long-term contributed revenue streams through campaigns for annual capital endowment, major gifts, and planned giving. George teaches fundraising at the Arizona State University Lodestar Center for Philanthropy and Nonprofit Innovation and holds a teaching fellowship with National Art Strategies. George, again, welcome to today's webinar. I will now hand it over to you. George? George? Hi, George. Are you there?
I am there, yes. I'm now unmuted.
Oh, wonderful. My apologies.
That's okay. And then are you going to switch the screen over to me now?
Yes. Here we go. I've switched that over to you.
Aha, there it is.
Wonderful.
All right. Let's move forward then. And hold on. We are almost there. All right. Here we go. All right, everything is working. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. And thanks, Sally, for bringing us together today. As a member of BPP myself, I'm grateful for the opportunities you give us to share knowledge. You and I both know that people on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border want the same things: to build healthy communities where they can raise their children in environments that are safe and supportive. We also know that healthy communities depend on social profit organizations and the donors who give generously to them. Bringing the two together is the privilege of the fundraiser, and BPP is hosting this webinar today to help its members do just that, to help them become stronger and more confident in securing the resources their programs need. After many years of learning and practicing and succeeding and failing, I've come to the conclusion, this particular conclusion, becoming an amazing fundraiser is within everyone's reach. And I do mean everyone's. I'll be sharing concepts and practices I've seen work in organizations that meet and exceed their fundraising goals. Those organizations do many things that make them thrive. We can't cover them all in 45 minutes, can we? So today, let's just concentrate on 3 of them. The first is understanding how potential funders value and evaluate what organizations do. The second is aligning core beliefs with how they raise funds. And the third one is growing lifelong commitments with their donors. The 2017 Giving USA report came out a couple of months ago. It told us many things, and many of them are encouraging to fundraisers. Among them, the report noted that Americans are incorporating new and different approaches into their fundraising and their philanthropy. More innovation, more collaboration, 21st century tools and platforms, inventive ways to give, connect, and volunteer. Giving USA also observed the trend of people and organizations increasingly wanting to come together to identify and solve the issues they care about. Many donors realize that they don't just want to be passive sources of cash. They expect to be considered equal partners. As fundraisers, it's in the best interest of the work we do that we recognize these changes. We ignore them at our organization's peril. When you and I set the objectives for today's webinar, we started with a shared belief. Fundraising is much more than just asking for money. Many people who could help us raise funds, fear the entire process because they view it as little more than arm twisting. When you fear fundraising, dislike it, or think that it's someone else's job, you almost guarantee that you will fail at it. And if you fail, the organizations our communities need will fail too. It's that simple, and it's that critical. This presentation will offer all of you my insights into why fundraising campaigns may miss the mark, what can be done to fix them, and most important, how anyone can become an amazing fundraiser. Let's begin with our learning objectives. First, we want to come to a better understanding of the ethics and accountability that make donors trust us. Second, we want to learn how a fundraising cycle works better at acquiring and attaining donors. Third, we want to discover the essential fundraising tools for success. And finally, we will share some resources that BPP members may not have utilized. Before we go on, I should also mention that when I use the terms like fundraising or development or philanthropy, I'm talking about the same thing. It's the process by which people who have resources share them with others to achieve something they both believe is important. I'm a true convert to the philosophy of donor-centered fundraising. It's one of the most important advancements in the past 20 years about the way donors relate to their donors, about the way organizations relate to their donors. Penelope Burke, who popularized the term donor-centered fundraising, teaches that donors are essential to the success of our mission. That's obvious, right? She reminds us that gifts are not cash transactions. In her book, appropriately called Donor-Centered Fundraising, Burke reiterates that no one owes us a gift just because we think our mission is worthy. Consider this simple but powerful idea. Any person who chooses to become a donor has enormous potential to assist us in fulfilling our organization's mission. A key reason that fundraising campaigns may be missing the mark is that the people who plan them don't act in accordance with these donor-centered practices. When we change the ways we treat our donors, we take the first step in putting those campaigns back on track. The Donor Bill of Rights was adopted in 1993 by leading organizations of fundraising. They understood that in order to grow lifelong commitments with your donors, you first have to recognize that they have rights. I'd like to highlight just 4 of them today. Donors have the right to access the information's most recent financial statements. They have the right to be assured their gifts will be used for the purposes for which they were given. Donors have the right to receive appropriate and timely acknowledgement and recognition of their contributions. and they have the right to know that confidential information about them and their donors, their donations, will be handled with respect. The AFP Code of Ethics and Accountability guides us to uphold the highest standards and visions of our institutions, of our profession, and of our own consciences. As fundraisers, we have the obligation to act ethically in all that we do. We work for a salary or a fee. We don't accept work that is paid based on receiving a percentage of how much money we raise, or on commission either. We immediately disclose conflicts of interest, and finally, we represent ourselves honestly and accurately when we talk about our professional experience, our qualifications, and our expertise. When we do this, donors trust us, our employers trust us, our communities trust us, and we trust each other. I already mentioned, would you excuse me for a second, and thank you. I already mentioned that fundraisers must keep all constituent information confidential. I'd like to add that we must do our best to make sure that contributions are used in accordance with the intention of the donor. Parallel to that, we must confirm that accurate and consistent accounting methods are used to calculate fundraising results. With their co-workers, fundraisers share the responsibility that their organizations comply with civil and criminal laws. Basically, we behave in the way we would expect other fundraisers to behave if we were the donor making the contribution. As I was putting together this section, I Googled the phrase fundraising cycle. In 0.43 seconds, I got 36,300 results. Yes, that many. Many knowledgeable people have put together diagrams like this one. They show the steps current thinking says that you've got to take to acquire and renew a new donor. That's putting it in the language of sales. These processes go by many names: moves management, donor loyalty cycle, sustainable fundraising formula. I call mine Captacion's 7 R's of fundraising: reflect, research, relationship, request, recognize, revive, and repeat. Reflection begins the fundraising cycle. Russell Willis Taylor, former CEO of National Art Strategies, advocates organizations asking themselves, what value do we provide to the community? And then asking, how does the community value what we provide? And most importantly, asking, do we and the community agree on this value? This is the point I made earlier about understanding how potential funders value and evaluate what organizations do. If your organization and the community it serves don't believe the same thing, you are in for big trouble. When potential donors don't agree with your assessment of your value, it won't matter how much you try to persuade them. A better approach would be to make sure that your programs reflect what the community tells you it needs, and then meeting those needs. If you have a reputation as an organization that listens to its constituents and truly serves them, then you will find that prospects believe you when you say to them, "We matter." It is only when we understand the value we offer that we can find our natural partners. Recently, I attended a workshop called Fundraising from the Heart, given by Lynn Twist, an important thinker about fundraising. She opened my eyes to new ways of thinking about the alignment of fundraising and values. With values, in this case, meaning the beliefs we hold. Lynn teaches what some may think is a radical idea: Everyone wants to share their money with others. Fundraising, according to Lynn, and I agree, is giving people an opportunity to invest in the better future they want for themselves and others. Lynn's book, The Soul of Money, which I do encourage you to read, points out that we need to change our mindset as fundraisers. We need to change it from scarcity to sufficiency. Too often we tell ourselves that our organization doesn't have enough. Not enough money, not enough staff, not enough volunteers, not enough programs, not enough donors. When we repeat this often enough, it becomes one of our core beliefs, whether we like it or not. Is this really the core belief we want to share with potential donors instead of the good we can do together? The answer is no. We succeed when we empower generosity in others. In order for resources to flow to the people, places, and things who need our help, we must change our mindset, our beliefs, from scarcity to sufficiency. There are enough donors out there with enough money to support our constituents, our programming, our staff, and our aspirations. What we need to do is align our values and practices with the respect that donors deserve. We must take our potential natural partner on the circular journey that all diagrams of the fundraising cycle portray. As Lynn says, we succeed when we empower generosity in others. The next step in the cycle is research. The prospect research strategy successful organizations use tells them three things about each potential donor. Are they linked to us? What is their ability to support us? And are they interested in what we do? Linkage, ability, interest. The very smart people at Convio, now a part of Blackbaud incidentally, wrote a paper for AFP, which was called Identifying and Cultivating Major Donors. They call the first section Gathering. You gather names of prospective donors. They can come from board members, staff, volunteers, and other donors. Or you mine your own databases to identify people you might not have approached before, or existing donors who may be ready to do more. After you've gathered the information, you have to analyze it. Start by synthesizing it, then evaluate the prospect's financial assets and capacity. Interpret what their other philanthropic interests might tell you about possible interest in what you do. Before you move on, look at the opportunities you offer for engagement, events, and volunteering. See if any of them might interest them and deepen their involvement. Once you've gathered and analyzed, it's time to recommend. Talk to those raising funds for you to make their best guess about where the prospect would fit into your rankings. One thing that is difficult to admit during the research phase is that some people's interests just don't align with your organization. This makes them not such a hot prospect no matter how much money they have. Don't let your fear of scarcity cause you to chase a prospect who will never become a donor. The relationship phase is, in my opinion, the most important phase of all. By deepening the relationship with a prospective donor, you learn valuable things about them. At the same time, you're also moving them toward a gift. You do this by carefully listening to what the prospect says. And I mean, really listen. When you are together, spend more time listening to them talk than listening to yourself talk. As you get to know what matters to them, you will figure out what will get them to the next place in their decision-making process. You want to take actions that will place your organization among the primary recipients of their philanthropy. That sounds like a lot of steps, right? Yes, well, it really is. and the only way to keep them straight is by using moves management. This is a systematic, strategic approach to cultivating prospective donors. When you pair moves management steps with tracking them in a donor relationship management database, you get the most out of your efforts. Doing so means you won't miss opportunities because prospective donors slip through the cracks. Just as important, you won't waste valuable time and effort on the wrong people. The key to successful fundraising is having the right solicitor ask the right prospect for the right amount, for the right campaign, using the right approach at the right time. You will know the time is right to make the ask when you can answer yes to these 4 questions. Have you gotten to know your prospect on a personal level? Are you sure the prospect is motivated to give to your cause? Does the prospect believe they have the capacity to give the amount you would like? Is the time right? When all those yeses are lined up, it's time to set the stage. Set up a meeting at the right place with the right person to make the ask. The conversation will be unique to each set of asker and askee. Many people find it helpful to role play the ask before actually doing it. Try it, you'll like it. When you sense the moment is right to pop the question, do it. And then be quiet. Wait and let the prospect think and respond. No matter how long it takes. There's nothing to be afraid of because the answer is going to be yes, no, or maybe. And you can prepare yourself for each outcome. I call my corollary to donor-centered fundraising the rule of 7s. In the year following a contribution, each donor must be thanked 7 different times by 7 different people in 7 different ways. The one absolute, no doubt about it requirement is sending an official thank you letter and tax acknowledgement within 24 hours. That's one of our best practices, and if you don't do it, you've just made your job much, much harder. Other ways you can show your gratitude include mailing a newsletter with articles and photos showing donor dollars at work, or inviting them to a donor recognition event. Having someone who has benefited from the gift write a thank you card, or frame a photo showing the result of the donor's gift and send it to them. The message you want to send, no, that you must send, is this could not have happened without you. At some point in the recognition phase, you or someone else is going to say, it's time to ask for another gift. It might be because a year has gone by, or because cash flow is bad, or because the project the donor funded was a big success and is now over. I encourage you to ask your organization a simple question. Have we earned the right to ask them again? Before someone says, of course we have, just ask them now. Stop and revise. Make sure you have done what successful fundraising organizations always do in advance of making another ask. Fulfill promises, take them on a journey, actively listen to them, thank you enough, make changes to better serve the donor, and lay the groundwork for the next ask. Congratulations! You did it right, and now you're ready to begin this virtuous cycle again. Reflect, research, relationship, request, recognize, revise, and repeat. What is in your fundraising toolbox? Do you have the tools you will need if you want the personal and professional success that results from becoming an amazing fundraiser. The first tool is money invested in the activities of your development department. You can't raise money without spending money. And the way to spend the right amount of money is to budget it first. When you are preparing your annual fundraising budget, ask yourself, what is our annual fundraising goal? Did we meet it last fiscal year? Are we on target to meet it this year? And do we need to raise more money next year to meet what is planned? All budgets contain direct, indirect, and overhead costs. But do you know the estimated cost of raising $1 in each type of fundraising you do? If you don't, now is the time to figure it out. Budget for it and invest in the types that deliver the biggest bang for the buck. In your budget, you'll want to make sure that you have provided the fundraising team what they need to do their work. Is there adequate hardware to support development systems and programs? Computers for the office, laptops for the road, tablets to show video presentations to prospects, printers capable of producing high quality but reasonably priced presentation materials. They, or acceptable alternatives, are essential. Equally important is the software that makes you more productive. If you look closely at your word cloud, you will see that it is made up of the names of all the different fundraising software products that are out there. How will you make sense of their options? Which one will do what your organization needs right now and can afford? One good thing is that there is a fundraising software package for every size organization, with prices ranging from low to sky high. If you're at all like me, having so many options is overwhelming. To avoid brain overload, I talk to 4 or 5 colleagues about which ones they are using and ask if they like them. I accept that I don't have the time to pick the perfect one, just a good one that everyone can use fairly easily. Like it or not, you have to invest into donor records management software. Believe me, you can't track moves management and contributions using a spreadsheet. Heaven knows enough people try to and then regret it. Does the donor research management software interface with your other systems, grants, finance, and depending on what your organization does, track ticketing, programming, and scheduling? The more integrated they all are, the easier it will be to have the information you need at your fingertips. And please don't forget about who needs to be trained to use the fundraising software. Budget for realistic training and the time it takes. You'll be glad you did. In successful fundraising organizations, boards of directors must approve the policies that guide fundraising activities. Staff plays the key role here. They help board members understand what the best practices in the nonprofit sector are for policies, systems, and procedures. Who needs to be on your fundraising team? The operative word is team because that is what it takes. The executive director, board director, development director, and development staff will most likely be the lead fundraisers for the organization. But they can't be successful without the participation of the rest of the board, other staff, and volunteers. From time to time, it may make sense to temporarily contract the services of a fundraising consultant. For example, when you are undertaking a capital campaign. Each person on the fundraising team has a specific role to play, that they are uniquely qualified to play. With creative thinking, you can find the right match between their abilities and the fundraising process. Who don't you want on your fundraising team? People who refuse to understand that fundraising is sacred work, as Lynn Twist calls it. She goes on to say that asking someone for a contribution means that you are giving them an opportunity to take a stand for a transformed, better future. Active members of the fundraising team go to sleep at night knowing that the work they do has long-lasting effect. The fundraising team needs to be well schooled in its fundraising knowledge. This should include solid grounding in the concepts, components, and methods of fundraising. They must understand and implement an evaluation process that does more than compare budgeted versus actual contributed revenue figures. Ongoing staff and board education about fundraising is essential. Investing the time and money into preparing the team will pay dividends. Money does not magically flow into our bank accounts, despite our fervent hope that it will. No, money flows only when we lay the right channel for it to course through. That channel is called the development plan. A well-thought-out development plan answers important questions. Who are the prospective donors? What are you going to do to engage them, and when is that going to happen? Who is going to cultivate them? What methods will you use to ask for contributions? What resources must you allocate to do it all? A written development plan helps everyone agree on the answers to these questions. It establishes a process of action and the means to assess its success or failure and learn from both results. I've mentioned a number of resources that I think will help you become an amazing fundraiser. Lynn's book, The Soul of Money, is available through her website, your local independent bookstore, or online. The Association of Fundraising Professionals makes many practical tools available for free to the general public. You can read about the accountable nonprofit organization at the AFP website. Penelope Burke's book, Donor-Centered Fundraising, is available at her website and other outlets. Spanish and English versions of the Carta de Derechos del Donante, also known as the Donor Bill of Rights, can be found at afpnet.org. As can copies in English and Spanish of the Code of Ethical Standards. We've now come to the end of our time together. I hope that you have found our subjects helpful. Ethics and accountability, the fundraising cycle, and essential fundraising tools for success. Maybe you've gotten some resources you didn't know about. These aren't the only important aspects to fundraising, but they do offer actions you can begin to implement today that will help you start to raise money tomorrow. Becoming an amazing fundraiser really is within your reach. Thank you for listening, and good luck.
Thank you, George. We will now start with the questions and answers, and you may submit them on the question panel, and I will read them as we receive them. We will give a couple of seconds in case anybody would like to ask these questions. Let's see. Okay, so we have first question. George, when you're researching a prospect, how do you know what information to look for?
Oh, that's a great question. So when you're researching a prospect, how do you know what information to look for? You want to do research so that you can quantify linkage, ability, and interest. When you're doing research, you'll learn that there's quite a bit of publicly available information you can access for free. And what you can't find for free, you can usually purchase. It's helpful in qualifying a prospect to find out things like real estate value, family relationships, contributions to other organizations, club memberships. And it's fairly easy to learn where they work and went to school and the boards they serve on. I would say that in any solid research process, you've got to commit to differentiating between what information is nice to know versus need to know. I don't need to tell you that the amount of information available on the internet about people is endless. It really is endless. More than one time I've found myself having to research the temptation to click one more link, to just read one more article, to enter one more search term, and I have to say to myself, just say no.
Thank you. So here's another question. Where do you get prospect names from?
So where do you get prospect names from? Well, I think the first thing that a fundraiser in an organization needs to do is have a conversation with people on the inside, with your closest stakeholders. And through those conversations, I think you can put together what constitutes a perfect prospect for your organization. And I think that's really going to be unique to each organization. It's going to depend on what the mission is, where you're located, and who or what are you benefiting. And then once you know that and think about this perfect prospect, you have created a perfect prospect profile. If there weren't so many P's in that, it would be a great name. So maybe let's just call it the Triple P.
Wonderful. Very easy to remember. We have another question. What if a board member says, I didn't sign up to raise funds?
Yes. Well, you know, that is a question that we need to prepare ourselves early on in our careers as fundraisers, because it is a common one, and it's a very common one. So I think it's important first to understand what are the leaders of your board, so the board director and the chair of the governance committee, what are they telling people when they're interviewing them and persuading them to join the board? And so knowing what they are saying will help you to prepare for that question and your answer. It is also a good idea to make sure that you've had that conversation, you and the executive director and the board director, to make sure that fundraising is a part of the board job description. Now, getting right to the question, what do you say at that point? During the fundraising cycle, there are many places at which people can participate in fundraising. Not everyone needs to ask for money. There may be some people who really are uncomfortable with that. But that doesn't mean that they can't advise you behind the scenes, host events in their homes where other people can talk, make introductions. There are other things that people can do. One that I like to do is to take an envelope with a bunch of thank you note cards to the board meeting and ask for volunteers who would write a personal thank you note. That's one of those things in stewardship and recognition that anyone can participate in.
Thank you. We have time for 2 more questions. we're asked if we're going to share the presentation, and we will. The recorded version of the webinar will be emailed directly to everyone, and it will also be posted on our website by tomorrow afternoon. So we have one more question in alignment with the one just answered, and it reads, you mentioned the team needing to know fundraising concepts. Can you explain what they are?
Yeah, sure. So we've talked about some of them today, and I guess I'll start with being donor-centered, behaving ethically, demonstrating accountability, understanding our values, aligning them with the way we fulfill our programming, how we interact with stakeholders. Important one that I can't stress enough is believing in sufficiency and not in scarcity. And another basic concept is the fundraising cycle. You know, one concept we didn't have time to talk about today are the types of capital an organization needs. So working capital, capital for risk and opportunities, change capital, recovery when something disastrous happens, facilities and equipment capital to be maintaining your facilities, and endowments. These address different needs you may and will likely have or want, and are you ready for that? So those are all different types of capital. It attracts different types of donors, and it requires you to have different approaches. One other one is the giving pyramid. We didn't talk about it today. So what else would I say? I guess why people give and when people give. So those are all of them that I can just think of off the top of my head.
Thank you. There's another question and a reminder to all our participants in the handout section of the control panel. There is a handout. You can click on it. It's in PDF, and then it'll just download onto your computer. We hope you find that very useful. So one more question. What are the components of fundraising shown on the knowledge slide?
Yes, that little diagonal graphic. Okay, some of them we talked about. Let's see. Okay, having a realistic budget, having electronic donor records management system, putting together the right fundraising team, getting them the knowledge they need, and collaborating on a development plan so that everyone involved stays on the same page. Some components we weren't able to talk about today are the development audit, looks at your entire fundraising operation, integrated development, which basically means are you covering all of the possible bases? Individual giving, foundation giving, government, and corporations. Those are sources of funds. The pyramid of campaigns, you know, which approaches that same thing. Mentioned earlier, well, ways people give, whether that's a component or I think that's more of a concept now that I think about it. And and one other thing on the slide is the second to the last one, and we really need to talk about in depth the subject of evaluation. It's a big subject. How do we build in evaluation as a pillar of our mission fulfillment? How do we evaluate the impact of our programs, not to mention evaluating our relationship development with donors and funders? And we don't always have time or take the time for evaluation because we're so busy doing things. But just as I encourage building in the budget as a thoughtful process at the beginning of a fundraising cycle, I also encourage building an evaluation at the beginning of the fundraising cycle.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, George, again for all of this useful information, and thank you for taking your time and joining us. And we'd like to recognize Con Alma Health Foundation. This this webinar was made with the generous support of them. And we invite you to get involved with the U.S.-Mexico Board of Philanthropy Partnership. On screen, you can see our Facebook, our website, our address, and our email. And thank you to everyone, and thank you, George, again. And this will conclude our webinar.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.